So what does the world look like, or the U.S. look like, in a collapse situation after, the dollar or whatever it is collapses, or the country collapses? Well, you have to understand you should be wanting a depression. Younger people, let me define that. Anybody under the age of 60 at this point really should be wanting a depression, like a full-blown, like hardcore mega depression. Because that would actually clear out a lot of bad investments, especially a hands-off depression, which is what you really want. You don't just want a depression, you want a depression where there's no government involved and they don't start printing money and they don't start trying bailing out all of these different industries, such as academia, real estate, etc. You wouldn't want them bailing that out. You'd want this to just go away because it clears out all these bad investments. This allows the market, what is the market? It's just people. This allows the market to correct. And then the people can actually operate. Especially, imagine if you were to mass deport all the illegals, and then if you were to cut off all of the H-1B gimmicks and send them home. Or you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Go wherever you want, but just not here. And especially if you didn't have any political involvement in the economy, then yeah, the economy corrects itself like super quick. And most of academia would be wiped out in probably, a month. Probably not even that. It wouldn't even take that long. It would be gone very quickly because it's a failed business model. And in fact, actually, it was a failed business model 20 years ago. Some of us old timers were talking about this stuff we saw this coming like a mile away. And because for the same reasons that a lot of people said, like, what happens when everybody has a degree in something? It just becomes worthless. It's just like, okay, so it's like having a high school diploma. What does that do? Really nothing. And nobody has ever asked for it. So yeah, this is one of these things that in the real business world, people pay for results. As a businessman, I pay for a result. All of my guys that I subcontract to, for example, and I do work with, and like, I pay for a result. If they produce the result, I pay them. That's it. I don't care if they spent even 10 minutes in school. I don't care that they can really do anything as long as they can produce the results I'm paying them for, right? And now I realize that in the academic sense, yeah, you wouldn't want to have a bunch of people who didn't have at least some kind of a somewhat rounded education, but the internet has that, right? Like, we have that now. We don't really have to do that. It's sort of like med school. Let me pick on med school for a second here. Back in the day, in the 1800s, 1900s kind of thing, you had to physically go to a location because that's where all of the medical knowledge was like warehoused, was at these institutions. Well, now it's not warehoused there. Now it's everywhere. Like, you can find medical knowledge everywhere. Again, I'm not talking about specifics, and I'm certainly not talking about the ability to work with cadavers and things like that, where you're having to see how arteries feel in your fingers and so on. Like, I understand that. But Da Vinci, for example, he had access to cadavers. Again, most people do not have access to cadavers. The vast majority of us do not have access to. We could go make them, but that's and especially if you use poor people, because nobody seems to care about poor people. But we already did that video. But you get my point, right? Like, that's so. No, there's certain things that you have to go to for something like that. But as far as like general knowledge, like, a lot of knowledge is available, especially if you can just kind of find the source. And especially if you can look and see, does the source that you're getting the information from owe any money to somebody else and have a reason to distort the information? If you want to know who rules you, for example, find out who your ruler is and then find out who they owe the most money to. Because that's who actually rules you. It's kind of the truth, how that works. So, no, if you wanted to know what the country would look like after that, I suppose it depends. Is it everything collapses, and so then everybody goes, oh my God, we need to look for a Messiah, the orange Messiah, and now we need to have the government come in and bail everything out, which will just make it worse. Much worse. Much, much, much worse. It'll just drag it on. I would argue that we still haven't really recovered properly from 2008, just because it's been just nothing but gimmicks and propping up real estate. And rather than let all of this stuff correct, houses should be almost like The Stand. You should be able to just go find a house that's empty and just go move into it at this point. But we're not allowing the markets to correct. Okay, remember, I talk about it a lot here. I talk about the idea of I use the example of reflux in chemistry. You ever reflux anything in chemistry? You ever taken chemistry and you're refluxing something? Yeah, it goes up, cools, and comes back down. Well, social mobility is that way too. You have an up, like, oh, we love those stories, and I talk about this a lot. We love those stories of like, oh my God, somebody started off with very little and then they became really rich. We love those stories. There's also the stories though that we don't hear about, which is the people who started off really rich and are supposed to go broke. We're not hearing any of that. We're not seeing that. We're not seeing the super rich going broke when they should be. They just keep getting bailed out. It's the same people over and over and over and over and over because it's easy to control those people. Most of them aren't very smart. And neither am I. I just have a lot of experience. But most of them are not really what you think they are. It really is like, it really is kind of a luck thing for them. Anybody can just be born to a wealthy family or a prominent family. And for a lot of these people, third and fourth generation trust fund kids, they're no different. I've said this before. They're no different than third and fourth generation welfare kids. They're no different. The mentality is the exact same. They really don't have any correlation between like work and money. They don't have any correlation between being productive and then producing income and then having to live on that income. Years ago I told the story, and I'll dust it off for new followers, but years ago I told the story about the guy that they take over, the kid that takes over the business from the old man, so to speak. And it's like, well, but he's done all those jobs, right? The old man had him go clean toilets and had him do this and had him run around and ran him ragged. The thing is that the kid still, the so-called kid, right, the son, he didn't have to live on that income that the guy cleaning the toilets was living on. He went home to a $2 million house and a trophy wife, right? So, yeah, he had to do the jobs, but he didn't have to live the life that the job had with it. Like, and some of you, if you've been in the workforce long enough, you know exactly what I'm talking about, especially if you've ever worked for companies that were smaller companies where the old man, passes on the torch to the idiot kid or the nephew or something like that. And you see the company basically go in the tank, and it's because the kid didn't have to live on the incomes of all of the jobs that he's paying out there. And so he doesn't really understand what's going on with his own people. When they come to him and say, hey, listen, I'm not able to even survive any longer. It's becoming impossible for me to afford to even work here any longer. And they don't understand it because for them, the scrubbing the toilet thing for the air, yeah, he did all those jobs, but he didn't have the lifestyle that went with it in a lot of cases. And by the way, I'm not even saying that the people who do all the menial tasks are supposed to have menial lives. In fact, it should be the opposite. It's supposed to be the opposite of that. I don't know if you know that or not. But the people who do in an actual hard money economy, which is why they hate hard money. They absolutely hate hard money. Bankers, brokers, boomers, billionaires, they hate hard money. They absolutely hate it. Because in a hard money economy, the people who actually do all of the work, all those menial jobs that everybody doesn't want to do, those are the people who end up making the most money because nobody else wants to do them. And I know I've covered that probably 200 times here. And a lot of the stuff that I talk about doesn't change because, well, the principles are the exact same. Nothing has changed. So it depends on the collapse. But if you're just going to keep doing this and you guys are just going to keep running back to the government, I don't care who's in government. I don't care if it's somebody you agree with politically or not. Like, oh, but we got this law and we got the Gulf of America. I don't know. That didn't do anything for me. It did not. My bank account did not go up when we changed the name to the Gulf of America. I don't know about you, but I didn't make 1 penny more. Like, there's just a whole bunch of, and there's just a whole bunch of this stuff. I don't know how anybody still falls for this anymore, frankly.